Hi everyone, welcome back to another edition of the Velvet Lounge Life Outlander episode 12, season 5, Never My Love. So this is the finale. So last episode of season 5, people, can you believe it? They were supposed to have 13 episodes. So what happened? That question will be answered in a future video. Also, yes, there will be a season 6, and just to make you aware, it will continue with this story. So the story is what you're going to see, which is also a continuation of last week's saga of Claire being abducted and what she goes through and her thoughts as she's going through it. Also, we find out what happened with Bree, Jemmy, and Roger and their attempt to travel to the future. And we also find out a little bit about another storyline that's sort of beginning. So one of the things I would like you guys to do is remember, if you have any comments, any opposing thoughts, any creative thoughts, anything to add, that is awesome. I love it. Questions are my favorite. Leave them in the comments below. Also, here's a trivia question for you because this song is key to this episode. Which band was or is Ringo Starr a member of? The Beatles or the Rolling Stones? Some trivia, and yes, that, believe it or not, Ringo Starr has a role, if you will, to play in this episode. And once again, just please remember to subscribe to our channel and also click the thumbs up. And remember, we do have a nice variety of content for you. We really love it when you guys, click that thumbs up, when you leave questions. Even if it's just a comment, I have people who'll just say hello or whatever. I really appreciate it. So please do that, and we will continue with this episode. So what's happening is Claire is flipping herself into a dreamscape fantasy world in the future as she's going through a variety of violent acts at the hands of the Brown brothers and their clan of idiots. So she ends up in her dreamscape in this Frank Lloyd Wright inspired home, which is a mid-century modern style home full of clean lines. Everything is in its place, lots of light. Obviously, there's natural elements to it, which is kind of opposite of where she is now. Things are dirty, they're jagged, they're violent, they're dark. And so also what she does in this dreamscape, and that's what the writers also called it, is she is, with people who she knows love her, care for her, protect her, and she brings them into her dream. One of the other things to note is the writers stated that they wanted Claire's, and I'm just going to tell you up front, rapes. She's raped repeatedly. Her situation to be different than what Bree went through or what Jamie went through. That's why they picked this particular way of telling the story. So this is Claire in her fantasy world. Note how clean, neat, and tidy she is. This is a mid-century modern rendering of Fraser's Ridge. So even in her dreamscape, she brings that home to the future with her. So here is Jamie in the future as far as the way that Claire sees him. Sort of has that, I think the group was named the Fine Young Things. I believe they were a British band with a mixture of, I guess you would say, a little dirty Rolling Stones in there. So yes, in her future, she brings him forth as well as others that I will show you. So the reasoning for Claire's abduction and all of the violence that's taking place is because of the Brown brothers. The guy in front is a Brown brother. The guy in the red coat, I will refer to him as Red Coat. He is a follower, as always. And the reason that this brown brother decided to rain hellfire is simply because his wife would not sleep with him one time. And the reason for that is she read Dr. Rawlings, as we know that was Claire in disguise, the newsletter that she put out to help women with their feminine health as well as their feminine birth control. So he found, when he looked in her desk, which the desk was open, he did not open it, and he saw that there was a cartouche that had Dr. Rawlings' name inscribed on it, and he put 2 and 2 together. So because of that, he's abducted this woman, and a lot of things are going to happen that are disturbing and that actually could relate to events of today, unfortunately. So he tells Claire that they're going to take her to Brownsville so that she can confess to all of the women that she's a charlatan, a fake, etc., which is ridiculous because the women know that her methods work because they have been using them. Ian, a well-decorated soldier in the 1960s. This would be about maybe 1968, maybe 1967. And that would be part of the Vietnam War era. Claire does make an attempt to get away, but it is futile. Claire cries out because Red Coat slashes her deeply across the breast with his knife, leaving a wide open gash. And in classic Claire style, you know she has to throw the mojo on these superstitious people. So she tells him he's going to go to hell for this. Basically, she says that they're all going to die. And should I spoil that for you? Yeah, they all die except for 1 or 2 of them. So we are going to talk about a couple characters in a few minutes. But there's an American Indian guy that is charged pretty much, him and this black fellow Tebby, with keeping Claire basically tied up. But both of them want something. One wants to go back to the future. So yes, one of them is a time traveler. Guess which one and put that in the comments, and then we'll find out the answer later on. And so one of them figures out that she is a time traveler because she said H. Roosevelt Christ. And so obviously Roosevelt wasn't president until many, 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 many years later. And so he knows based upon that Claire is someone from the future. So this fellow's name is Tebby, and he is, following this gang of criminals. I don't know why, but at the end of the day, he's really the only person that helps Claire. There is another person that offers to help her, but she has to wait to get that help, and also in return for certain merchandise and services. Not the services and merchandise you're thinking of. We'll get to that. Tebby and Claire tried to devise a plan of escape, but it doesn't work. So the evil Red Coat decides he's going to take Claire across the river instead. Something else to note is in this episode, I felt, and I don't know if other people felt this as well, that there was less dialogue than normal, and I was okay with that because of the way the story is told. So in this episode, we have Murtaugh, Jocasta, Fergus, Marcelly, and their kids. And I thought that was pretty awesome that those are the people that she brought forth with her. Of course, she could have brought more, but obviously these are like some of the closest people, as if they're almost like her children in a way, in that Murtaugh and Jocasta are like, I'll say surrogate in-laws. Well, they are in a way, but I would say like an aunt and uncle. So let's talk about this guy for a moment. He is an American Indian that traveled to the past with Ottertooth, also known as Robert Springer, aka Bob, and he states another group of American Indians. They all came to the past so that they could change things, and of course, to help their people not be robbed, murdered, raped, desiccated by the white settlers. So unfortunately, as we know from history, that plan did not work. And what ends up happening is Bob is killed by the Mohawk because the Mohawk think he's like crazy, telling him about these things of the future that they don't believe. And so this fellow wants to get back to the future because he's been in the past for many, many years now. And he needs to have jewels as well as know where a portal is to do that. And there's a deal that's made. We'll talk about that later. So one of the things that Claire does as a weapon is she puts the hardest evil eye on this dude ever. It was classic what Kate did in that role. But unfortunately, being bound and tied, having no weapons and no backup forces, she needed to be more careful. He notices and he loses his little teeny tiny mind. So Claire is dragged to this sort of like a clearing and tied to a tree by her neck. I was like, whoa, what's up with all this neck stuff? Look at what happened to Roger. I thought we had enough of that. So one of the things to note is when watching this episode initially, it was as if the air was sucked out of the room a little bit because of the violence being so immediate and so plentiful and so hard, so harsh. It didn't matter if she was walking on water. I mean, this guy was going to do, he's like this brown brother that I showed you before. He is the one that's basically doing a lot of the like violent acts on her, as well as the red coat dude. The other folks are more following. However, unfortunately, the rest of them show their dirty deed side, except for Tebby and the Indian fellow. Now, we'll talk about those two later on in this episode, but I will tell you that, of course, there's another plan that's made to try to escape. And yes, people, it does not work. So now you can see handsome Murtaugh and the beautiful Jocasta. And of course, Ian's at the table. It's Thanksgiving evening. The turkey, as you can see, has been carved. The meal has been served, but Roger, Bree, and Jemmy have not arrived yet. So obviously they're having some dinner conversation. So Claire basically thinks she's seeing a ghost because when this guy mentions Ringo Starr, and yes, I'm doing this episode differently with subtitles for you, she realizes he's from the future, and she verifies his question by stating, yes, he's a drummer. So she knows that he is definitely from the future, and he says to her, he knew that the writings that were found of Dr. Rawlings had to be from someone of the future because of, obviously, there were things that she put in there that only someone in the future would know of. And also when she said Jesus H. Roosevelt Christ, and of course verifying the drummer Ringo Starr, these are all the things he needed to know. So now, did you note in the comments below that you thought it was this American Indian guy, or did you guess that it was Tebby, that was a time traveler? So one of the other things that happens is he tells Claire that he needs to get back to the future because he's been in the past way too, like so long. It must have been at least 10 years at this point. And he needs to have the gemstones, as well as, of course, she knows where a portal is. And she tells him that if he helps her escape, that, you know, she will get him these things. But they need to get away. And he tells her, well, don't worry, we'll go after these hooligans fall asleep. And Claire's like, no, we need to go now, because she heard them talking about the fact that her legs were not tied. So she has an idea of what they have planned for her, and obviously it is not good. And so he's like, but they will kill us both. Like, we have to wait until they go to sleep. So he ends up gagging her and going back to the group because they called him. So he tells Claire that she needs to act more afraid, and that what she thinks is going to happen is not going to happen, because these dudes are afraid of her. They think she's a witch, but she already kind of figured out that they're beyond that fear, because the more that they rip her down and beat her up and she can't escape, like there's no magic, she knows that they are not afraid of her the way that this fellow thinks that they are. So as the violence is taking place upon her body, she goes into a safe place, of course, which is in the arms of Jamie in her dreamscape. So at this point, Claire has been raped by Cuddy, who is basically a child, like a teenager, that is Cuddy Brown. So he's one of the Browns, and his uncle goads him on to go ahead and do it. And also Lionel Brown, who claims to hate Claire so much that he decides to rape her, which is absolutely ridiculous. And then he's going to invite the rest of the group to line up and have their turn. And besides the other cowards that are in line, you see Redcoat there as well. So as Claire is going through hell in reality, even in her dream, there's a hell. And the hell is that the police officers arrive to tell her that Bree, Roger, and their child were killed in a car accident due to weather conditions. And remember, this is Thanksgiving. So what we have here is Bree, Roger, and baby Jemmy, of course. And where have they landed? Look at Jemmy's face. What does that tell you? Do you have a speculation? Quickly type it in the comments down below. And of course, Roger and Bree are in shock themselves. They have landed back almost exactly where they went through the stones. Okay, they landed maybe 100 feet away from there or less. And what baby Jemmy recognized was his uncle Ian. And what happened, according to Bree and Roger, is as they were going to touch the stone, they thought of home. So obviously that means their home is Fraser's Ridge now. It is not in the future where they were before. And of course, baby Jemmy, if you think about it, this is the only home that he's ever known. Bree notices that the fiery cross is lit right at the top in the center of the screen, Fraser's Ridge. So she knows, as well as Roger and Ian, that something is incredibly wrong. So Jamie has checked over his, I'm going to call them mini militia, and that's Lizzie, who has, taken the place, basically, I would say, as Bree asked her to, of Bree, to make sure that they have everything they need for this particular battle, if you will. And look at Jamie's face. He is about the TCB at this moment. He is going to get his wife back. But just before leaving, there are people on the horizon. If you recall, I told you last week that kilts will be back. Well, there you go, and thank you. And the people on the horizon, of course, are Roger, Bree, Jemmy, and Ian. And quickly, Jamie has to fill them in on what happened. He orders Bree to stay at the ridge. Of course, she wants to go. He's like, no, we need you here. Like, they are trying to make sure they have guns on the ridge. And of course, guns will be going with them. And Roger tells him he's going with them as well. He's like, you know, he's his, like when they were going to do that battle with Governor Tyron, he was, you know, called to his side, and he's still at his side. Also, Josiah, Ian, Fergus, like all the main people who are related in one way or another to Claire and Jamie, tell them they are going with them, especially because they're males and they do go to fight this battle. And I have to tell you, Josiah, as we know, he would be considered a sharpshooter by today's terms and be amazing at it. And to see Ian in action with his hatchets and his knives, wow, he really looks like his uncle in a smaller version when they show him like doing all of these moves. So John Bell, brilliant. You were excellent at that. And whoa, the simple movements, action, and the deliberateness of the moves that John Bell made as he was preparing to go basically to war, that added such a presence to these scenes. It was pretty awesome. I actually had to like watch it at least twice. One of the methods of camera work that they used is what I equate to a magic lantern. It's sort of like when you have these, it's a Victorian thing where they have these cutouts in black, and there would be like this colored background. Usually it was white, maybe slightly yellowed like this. And this is where all the violent actions took place as Jamie and the rest of the men of the Ridge came to rescue Claire. So this is where they took and did that sneak attack on the Browns camp, and they ended up killing every single one of them except for 2 or 3 of them. I believe that Tebby and definitely the American Indian guy, I don't believe Tebby was killed. The American Indian guy, it was verified he was not killed. And he was not present either, like they didn't find their bodies. Also, one of the Brown brother that's the worst, Lionel, they thought was dead, but he wasn't. And he does get his just desserts later by someone super surprising. So even Roger had to shed blood, take a life. We know that he took a life once when he had to suffocate the lady because she was burnt beyond a crisp. And that was like a mercy thing. But here he had to, in battle, take the life of this individual, and he did it without much hesitation. Later on, he will have a conversation with Bree where he feels as if he must confess what he did. And of course, it's understandable what he did and why he did it. Claire does not know if she's dreaming or if what's happening is a reality. She's almost completely passed out. You can see how pale she is. So just like in reality, in her dreams, her and Jamie are reunited. And at the end of it all, Claire does recover to a point. Jamie reminds Claire that she is alive and she is whole. And of course, she sees Fergus and Ian, and she knows these things to be true. So this fellow tells Jamie that there's some left. What do you want us to do with them? Well, he doesn't really ask he knows that Jamie wants them dead, but he thinks that Jamie wants to do it. This guy offers the knife to Claire to do it, which of course she can't do. She's pretty much decimated and has 0 of anything left in her pocket. And so what ends up happening is Ian and Fergus finish off the rest of the perpetrators, and they take back Lionel Brown to the Ridge, imprisoned, of course, so that he could be questioned as to what other plans and evil deeds did they have, in their arsenal of garbage. But something happens to him before he is questioned. Jamie remembers that Claire cannot kill these dudes because she's bound by an oath as a doctor, but obviously other people are not bound by such an oath. Jamie asks Claire who, how many, basically have raped her, beat her, etc. And she says, I don't know. And this is the look on his face. And their faces. Jamie gives the order. So something I just verified, Tebby is one of those that is killed at the end. Wrapped in Jamie's tartan, basically he brings her over so that she can see that these evil doers will never bother her again. I've been blessed to live in an area that looks just like this in our woods. And so they're on their way back to Fraser's Ridge with Lionel Brown, a perpetrator, number one, and Claire, obviously, who is in pretty much torn up, dire straits and needs to be put back together. Something that Claire was thinking about as she was being brutalized and practically murdered is Marcelly. She didn't know whether Marcelly had lived or not after the attack at the ridge, which Marcelly did live, and her baby is still has a nice strong heartbeat in her belly. And unfortunately, the fellow that she was treating did die. They ran him through with a knife, and everyone else was pretty much fine, including little Germain. If you remember, Marcelly had to have him hide underneath a bed. Something else to know is in season 6, the story of Marcelly and Fergus will be expanded upon. If you've read the books, you'll know that they have a child that suffers from dwarfism. And is that the child that's in her belly now, or will that be a future child? We will find that out later on. So Claire asks about the American Indian who was there at her attack, etc. And Jamie confirms that he was not there. His body was not found. So that lets us know that in the future, that character will be in season 6. Everyone arrives back at the ridge, and Jamie has already told Claire that Bree, Roger, and Jemmy are back at home. Oh, and when Claire reaches for Marcelly as well, your Kleenex box would be emptied if you saw this. Claire is trying to get herself back together, and Bree reminds her that she has her ear, her hand, obviously her heart, if she needs it. Jamie tells Claire, the sight of you tears my heart, and he eventually says very quickly he would like to kill someone. Obviously, they had to kill a lot of people, but he is still enraged. Jamie tells Claire he knows, how she feels, obviously. And she's like, no, I've lived through a world war. I've lived through the death of 2 husbands. The death of 2 husbands? Did you guys hear that part? And she goes on, with a small list of other things that she's gone through that are extreme. And she says that she will not let this leave her beaten or basically shaken. Tears in Jamie's eyes. So it's the next day. Claire approaches the surgery. Lionel's laid out on the table, and Marcelly is attending to him. The coward pleads for mercy, and Marcelly puts him right in his place. A syringe is prepared. Yes, people, our heroine, Marcelly, gives him his medicine and his just desserts.